guys, it is Aoife from Fred Weasley Died Laughing, and I'm here to do my weekly wrap up. And the first book was a book I had originally put on my February TBR for Feminist Lit February, so thankfully I did get that finished in February, so it does count towards that readathon. The book was The Woman Who Fought an Empire by Gregory J. Wallace. This is about a woman called Sarah Aronson who was kind of in charge, or she helped run this spy ring. I think it was just around the time of World War I, just after World War I, in Palestine, and it was basically where she was helping Britain in their fight against the Ottoman Empire. And eventually this woman, she was captured by, I think it was the Turkish army, and she was tortured for, I think, 4 days before she eventually was able to, she killed herself in the end, just because she obviously didn't want to give any secrets away, and she ended up killing herself for the cause of the spy ring. This book, it wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be, I will admit, and I did feel like I felt like the men that were in Sarah's life ended up being a lot more interesting than she was herself, and I think like the way she died is also, it's very, very tragic, but I think it does give a really, really good story, and I think it's an easy way to like try and create a whole book around this one woman, even though she herself, like, she wasn't on her own with this spy ring. Her brother originally set it up, and she had a lot of different other people. Her brother, she had this best friend, to do with them in the book as well, and a lot we were told about them, and then we were only kind of getting snippets of Sarah's life for some parts, because at some parts she was married and she did move to Constantinople. While she was in Constantinople, and she wasn't in where the spy ring was, and we were getting information about other people and the other men in this spy ring, and there was a lot of times where we were being told about Sarah, especially at the start, and we were being told about how kind of attractive she was, and her womanly body, and, you know, her figure, and how all these men were in love with her, and like, that's great, like, yeah, okay, it's great to have loads of men in love with you, I'm sure, but at the same time I was like, but like, what does that have to do with the story of her running a spy ring? Like, I don't think we really need to know about all the men who were in love with her because she ran a spy ring. Yeah, so I just kind of felt like there was some information like that we didn't really need to know. There were some bits in this that I did find really interesting. There were some bits around, one of the reasons Sarah was so passionate about the spy ring is because she witnessed some parts of the Armenian genocide, and I feel like I've always heard about the Armenian genocide, but I never knew some details around it, and I didn't get like a big look into it in this book, but I did get some more than what I originally knew. And what I did find out through this book was just absolutely shocking and awful, and it's something I think I would like to read more about in the future and learn more about, because yeah, there were just some parts of it, and again, like, I do know a bit about World War One, but a lot of the books I have read about have always been centered around Europe, like, you know, obviously Britain and France and Germany, and I haven't really read books that have kind of, you know, like into the Ottoman Empire and around Palestine and Israel and how the World War One and Two affected them. I've never really known much about that as well, so I think that was interesting from this point of view as well. But overall, I just wasn't that invested in this book. I did skim read some of it because I found some of it just not that great, and as I said, I actually found Sarah herself was overshadowed at parts by the other people in the story, who just seemed to be that little bit more interesting than her at points. So overall I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars, but it would be kind of a low 3. The next book I finished was an audiobook and was Into the Water by Paula Hawkins. I did originally start this during the Thrillerathon, and I finished it this week. So this had a full cast recording, which was nice, but it was one that we did need that full cast because there are so many characters in this book. So this book mainly centres around this woman called Jules, who's going back to this place that she used to visit a lot when she was younger with her family. Her mum and dad had a house in this town, and her sister lives in this town now, but she's actually been called back because her sister has been found dead, and the police believe that her sister has killed herself by jumping into this river that is in this town, that there's lots of history to do with this river, and there's a lot of history around women drowning themselves in this area, and her sister was really, really like obsessed with this river and obsessed with the tales of the women who have lost their lives in it. And Jules just kind of feels like there's just something else going on. She doesn't think her sister would have killed herself, but she was kind of estranged from her sister as well. They haven't really talked that much during the years, so she doesn't really know exactly what was going on in her sister's life. So you have loads of different characters in this from the town. There is also Jules's niece, her sister's daughter Lena, and her best friend had killed herself in this river as well, like just about 6 months beforehand, and there could be a connection between that girl's death and Lena's mom mama's death as well. And we're kind of like going around the story as we see there's a lot of secrets in this town. There's a lot of secrets people are keeping from each other. There is a lot of bad blood between some characters as well, and there's basically a lot of suspicious people. I will say I liked this. I think it was good on audiobook, but at the same time I felt the start of it, I felt a little bit confused because there were just so many characters, especially for a thriller. There was just a lot of characters. So every time there was a new character I was like, oh god, another one. And then obviously there was another person, another audiobook narrator as well. And I do think all the audiobook narrators did a very good job, though some did have different accents for other characters. So some of the accents and stuff just didn't match up between all the different narrators, and it's like they didn't really talk with each other, like to say how they each were going to play that character. So there were some kind of discrepancies in that, which isn't a massive deal. I didn't really mind that much, but I did feel like I was involved in the story and I was really interested to find out. I did have a lot of guesses. Some of the stuff did end up being quite, like, I think I did guess a lot of what was going to happen. There were some characters who were very, very dislikable in this book, which I always like. I like to have a character that you can just really dislike and really hate. So yeah, like, it wasn't that bad. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars overall. The next book is a book I received from HarperCollins in exchange for an honest review, and that is, well, be helpful if I put it the right way up, Stronger, Faster and More Beautiful by Arwen, Elys, Dayton. This is a very interesting book, and it is basically a look at what the future could look like if we keep on with kind of the medical discoveries that we currently, like, you know, are looking into, kind of like gene sequencing, DNA, like changing DNA, going into, you know, like changing things around like fetuses and stuff in the womb, like whether there's things we could do to kind of like improve them, like, you know, make people smarter, make people faster, make people stronger, and what basically this could mean in the future. So this is like this is actually kind of a collection of short stories in a way, but they all are kind of interlinked, where like the first story is in a few years, and the next story after that is a few years after that, and then we have like many years in the future. But like there is this like connection between all the stories at the same time. We do hear some characters' names pop up again. I liked some stories more than others, and there were some that seemed like quite plausible, that could happen in the future. And there's, like, you know, like things like being able to like regrow parts of human organs from our DNA, and from like tissue samples from other parts of the body to help people who've been like really badly injured in accidents and stuff. Like there's stuff like that where like you could think that things like that could definitely happen in the future, and maybe people will become more almost robotic in a way as we get those kind of discoveries, and we eventually have that type of technology, which could possibly happen someday. And then there's others, like there was one really interesting part, which was about a young boy who had been kind of enhanced in the womb, but then eventually he ends up being kind of treated further as he grows older, and eventually when we meet him he's around 11 years old, and he's extremely smart, but he doesn't really have much empathy for anybody, and he lives underwater with these manatees who are used to grow extra human organs in like their bellies and stuff, for like, you know, transplants and stuff like that. And he basically looks after these manatees, but he himself has been enhanced where he can live underwater for most of the time. He has almost like flippers instead of legs, and he's able to translate like words into the manatee language, and he's able to breathe underwater and see underwater, and it's just really crazy but really interesting. And I actually would have loved like a full like even more with him. So story at the very end where we see things kind of all come to a head, and we see how body modifications and messing with gene therapy and stuff like that could end up being a complete disaster in the future. But that's a very much a dystopian look at the future, where some parts are not that dystopian and other parts are very dystopian. The last story is very dystopian, but we follow these two characters called Luck and Starlock, and I just really enjoyed their story, and I really enjoyed their relationship with each other, and I actually would have liked like a full-length novel, I think, about them. I feel like there was a lot more to explore with their story, and because it's quite dystopian-esque, well, it is dystopian, so yeah, I really enjoyed that. I just kind of felt like parts of this were kind of surface level, where I wish I don't know how much the author knows about kind of like, you know, DNA and gene sequencing and all that kind of stuff, and like the real science behind it all. I don't know how much she herself knows about that, or how much, like, obviously she did research for it, but I think a lot of it is kind of like possibilities, where like I have obviously read things like This Mortal Coil by Emily Sivada, and Emily herself is a scientist, and a lot of the science in that is so real, and I didn't feel it so much with this book, so this book did feel a little bit more surface level, and I feel like the stories were simpler than I expected them to be. I didn't expect them to be quite so simple and quite so, which is probably good for people in terms of who might not read that much science fiction like this. It's probably more accessible for them. I think I was just expecting that little bit more hardcore science fiction than what this delivered to me, so I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars overall. And the last book I finished with probably my favourite of the week, that was Kissing the Witch by Emma Donoghue, which I received in exchange for an honest review from Pan Macmillan. And this was so good. I really enjoyed this. This is a collection of short stories about, basically it's about fairy tales, and the fairy tales we all know and love, like Beauty and the Beast and Snow White and Sleeping Beauty and all of these guys, Rapunzel. But it's like a reimagining of these fairy tales, and this is the most original reimagining of fairy tales I've read in a really long time, and each story is connected with each other. So the first story we have is Cinderella, and at the end of that story, Cinderella turns around to her fairy godmother and is like, who were you before you arrived in my kitchen? And then the fairy godmother tells her story, and she is Snow White, or I don't think she was actually Snow White, I think she might have been Beauty and the Beast or something like that. And like, there are just so many, like every story, like every character is connected to the next story, and they tell their story and they tell their story, and it's just so interesting that all these fairy tales end up being completely connected. And one of the things I loved about this book is that each princess, or each character, each of our fairy tale characters that we all know and love, ends up becoming her own hero in a way, and I just loved it so much. One of my favourite stories in this one, I think, was the Beauty and the Beast story, which was really interesting, was really, like, there was a really nice twist on it that I loved at the end. And yeah, this is actually quite short. It's like less than 300 pages, and it's one I flew through, so I think this would be great for anyone who just needs a short read, and one that you can, as I can say, you completely get gripped into each story, and because they're all connected as well, you don't feel like you're reading like a bunch of different stories. You're kind of reading a full length in a way. But yeah, I absolutely love this. I give it 5 out of 5 stars, and I loved it. Emma Donoghue just keeps like pumping out these amazing books for me. I love Emma Donoghue. She's one of my favourite writers, and I'm really glad this was my first read for the Irish Readathon as well, and because it ended up being a great one. So that's everything I have read this week. Please let me know what you guys have read, if you guys are reading any of these books or whatever, just let me know. Comment down below and let me know any of your thoughts, and I will see you guys again next time. Bye.